On today's show, the Houston Rockets set to formally introduce Ime Udoka as the next head coach of the franchise. Plus, we'll take a look at who benefits the most from the addition of Ime Udoka on this Rockets roster and what Udoka means for the future of Alperen Sengun. All that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day, every single day, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym, slacking off from work. If you're an everydayer, thank you for making Locked On Rockets part of your life every single day. My question for you today, if you could ask Ime Udoka one question, what would it be? Let me know in the YouTube comments, because we have a locked-in time. Ime Udoka will be speaking to the media. He'll do his introductory press conference at 1 p.m. Central Time, a Wednesday afternoon, April 26th. So be on the lookout for that. There should be a live stream available. If there is a live stream available, we will have the feed running in the Rockets Watch room, so definitely want to tune in for that. Hang out with other Rockets fans reacting to the press conference, all that good stuff. So be on the lookout for all of that Wednesday afternoon. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, the X's and O's man himself, Alykhan Bijani, who you can follow on Twitter at Rockets_insider. And we're going to get Alykhan's immediate thoughts and reaction to the Rockets hiring Ime Udoka, as well as diving into, over the course of the episode, kind of just who on this Rockets roster actually benefits the most from Ime Udoka, and also what can we maybe expect Udoka to do with Alperen Sengun as the big man in the middle defensively for this Houston Rockets team. Alykhan, give us your thoughts, man. Give us the details. How are you feeling about this Ime Udoka hire for the Rockets?
Jackson, when we decided we were going to do the podcast, and just in preparation for it, I'm not going to lie to you, I have a lot of different thoughts. From a basketball perspective, and when you talk to people around the league who've spent time with Ime and like coaching, playing, you just rave about him and his traits in terms of coaching, and how he can kind of motivate but also connect with players in the NBA, and also has an X's and O's acumen as well. And they very much rave about his defense and how his biggest thing is about making sure the team is a good defensive team before anything else. Now that's the basketball side, but I've been conflicted because I've been also thinking about the allegations and why he was suspended essentially for one season by the Celtics and fired essentially from his job. And it's something I hope that people don't just dismiss because now he is the head coach of your favorite team. I hope it's not something that people just look at, oh, he's learned his lesson, he served his time, and that's it. We still don't know all the details. I think a lot of it is, and granted, because you are a fan of the team, or if you are listening, you may be a fan of the team. So you're thinking from that perspective, but we should also think about the perspective of the other individual involved, right, in Boston, kind of what that is like, and just be very cautious and cognizant, right, of all the perspectives involved and everything going on, right, and just even having the conversation or coming up in a press conference could like how can that also be for the person who was involved, not just Ime? So it's a lot of different things. I'm saying all this because I'm very much, thinking about that perspective here. Like I said, besides the basketball thing. And I was very disappointed, Jackson, to see some really poor taste and disrespectful comments once the report came out that Ime was agreeing to be the next head coach of the Rockets, and how people were, saying, "Oh, you have to protect the certain women who are affiliated with for the Rockets organization." I just want people to just serve as a reminder that, first of all, that's what that happened when that came out. That's not a good thing. And then second of all, just we have to still be cognizant that there was an investigation by a third party. It was done. The NBA, Adam Silver, has come out and said they do not see a problem with him being hired and being able to coach next season. All that is important, right? All that is important context. But as we go into an introductory presser, as we go into Ime Udoka being the head coach is the face of the franchise. They are always talking pregame and postgame. As Ime becomes that face of the franchise, it's important for us to to understand that he did something. He was dismissed for something, and let's wait for all the facts to come out. And just wanted to be able to throw that out there, Jackson. Like I said, from a basketball perspective, so many people rave about him, but I don't want to just dismiss kind of what is also along with the basketball side of it.
No, and I fully agree with you, Alykhan, right? Like if in your life, my life, if you're listening to this podcast, right, think of the women in your life, right, that you would have hated this situation to have happened to them, right? If it shouldn't carry any more weight just because if something happened to you personally, right, you wouldn't want this to happen to the situation to happen to anybody. And so I do think it's something that you actually have to focus on and consider. And I think it's really tough because I think you can do both things, right? You can be excited about what Udoka brings to the organization from a basketball perspective, from an X's and O's perspective, what he's going to do for that Rockets locker room. You can also highlight and acknowledge the fact that he has to address and own up to and identify exactly what happened in Boston. And the Rockets have to also identify it and provide reasoning for why they felt like it was okay to proceed and move forward with Udoka, and why they were content and even excited to make him essentially what is the face of the franchise, right? You talked about it. The head coach is kind of the spokesperson, the ambassador for the franchise, right? That is the guy who carries the message. We saw Steven Silas doing it for 3 years, right? He was the guy who had to be there at every media scrum, pregame, postgame, practices, all of that, answering the media's questions constantly. That's the scrutiny and the microscope that Ime Udoka is going to be under. So I fully agree with you there that it's something that we're going to address and is going to be addressed heavily in the introductory press conference. And I hope that the Rockets do a sufficient job of addressing it. Now, it is worth noting there is a lot of reporting that has been coming out in the past couple days since the announcement of Ime's hiring as the Rockets head coach. Most recently, Adrian Wojnarowski sharing some insight, just a quote directly from Woj here. For Houston, they met Udoka in person. They spent time with him. They talked to a lot of people who have worked with him, who have known him, who have vouched for him through the years in different organizations, and came to the decision to offer him their next their head coaching job. So it does seem like, at least right now, the vetting process has gone well, that there hasn't been anything else that has been dug up, anything that was hidden during the original reporting and trying to understand exactly what took place in Boston. And it's all, again, we're going to have to see exactly how Udoka and the Rockets kind of handle themselves during this introductory presser. But I do think it's absolutely an important point to bring up, Alykhan.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're asking me how I think this will fit from a basketball perspective, if I'm looking at his time as a head coach in Boston in a vacuum, right? Which is hard to. This is why I brought up this whole point here in the first segment. But if I look at just from the basketball on-court thing, this is a complete 180 from what you had with Steven Silas. You're bringing in a guy who is not afraid. There's been times where he started a conversation And the way he talks about confrontation in the past is that it's not like a bad thing. For him, confrontation is a good thing because it's acknowledging up front with the other person what they're seeing and what they may disagree with. He did that all the time with Boston early in the season. And as they got healthy, as Robert Williams came back, that's when they became the best team in the league last season. So, on the court, you had players entering their prime. He did a good job pushing their buns and going from there. A lot of parallels and similarities with how he can do that here. So from a basketball perspective, a lot of excitement if you're a Rockets fan in terms of what he could potentially do with this team.
And we're going to get into some of that here, what we can expect from Udoka as the Rockets head coach, who benefits the most from him on this Rockets team. We'll take a look at some of the names on this Rockets roster, like Jalen, Kevin Porter Jr., Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., what we can expect Udoka to unlock or do more of with some of those guys. We're going to get there in just one moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. Look, Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is the best mobile game that I've played in a long time. It's a ton of fun. It's super addicting. If you think that you could be a great NBA GM, you've got to check out this game because I had the same thought, and it honestly wasn't as easy as I thought it would be, right? The game allows you to manage every strategic aspect of a franchise, playing through seasons and leading your franchise and fans to glory as you build a historic dynasty. In the simulation, you'll be in charge of hiring the right coaches and assistants, trading and training players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency, the draft, and all the ups and downs of multiple seasons. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Look, me and the other Locked On hosts, we already made a little league. We're like 10 seasons deep. We've had titles. We've had like a lot of trash talk going back and forth. It has been a ton of fun. You've got to check it out. And right now, Locked On Rockets listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probasketballgm.com, scan the QR code, or look it up on the App Store. That's probasketballgm.com. Ultimate Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Ibotta because, look, we're always throwing money at something, right? Whether it's kids' school supplies, a new house project, the list goes on and on. It's time to stop spending your hard-earned money without getting anything in return. Enter Ibotta. You can earn cash back on every shopping trip. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items from produce to personal care to pantry goods. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that simple. The average Ibotta user earns $120 per year in real cash back. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKED when you register. So go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code LOCKED. That is Ibotta, Ibotta, in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKED. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, Alykhan, when we take a look at what this Rockets team currently is and has on the roster, first off, this roster is going to be probably so different from where it is today to where it's going to be opening night of the 23-24 season in October. What is that? 6 months down the line from now. But it still warrants us looking at this current roster and kind of getting into preliminary ideas, thoughts about how Ime Udoka might be able to further unlock some of the players on this roster. And I know we're going to tackle Sengun a little bit later in the show, so I don't want to get to him quite just yet. But the guy that I'm actually so intrigued by is Kevin Porter Jr. under Ime Udoka. Now, before I get all the KPJ haters, in my mentions and mad at me for even suggesting this, I've said for a long time that there's this 3 to 5% left in me of just, I wonder what Kevin would look like with a different head coach, right? Somebody who could maybe get him to buy in to a different basketball philosophy or buy into a different style of play or a different role on this Rockets team. And when you look at Ime Udoka, when you look at his career, not only as a coach, but as a former player, somebody who played alongside the San Antonio Spurs big three, came from the Popovich tree, both as a player and as a coach, and really kind of prides himself on that hard-nosed, gritty, defensive mentality, but then also the unselfish style of play, right? I think those are going to be staples of what we see with Ime Udoka and his basketball philosophy for this Rockets team. And when you look at Kevin Porter Jr. and you see some of the ways that he's been, at times he's locked in defensively, or when he's really focused on offense and when he's playing that unselfish brand of basketball, those are when he's been at his best, right? The issue with him has been consistently performing at that level. And Ime might be the coach who's able to actually tap into that and unlock the full potential of a talent like KPJ.
When I'm looking at Kevin Porter Jr. with Ime Udoka, looking at three things. Ime was very much high about switching pick and rolls and just having a very heavy switching scheme defensively, and I very much expect that to happen with the Rockets. I'm looking at, so that's number one, switching. Number two, what I'm looking at is three-point shooting. Now, he built his offense last season, taking guys who were really good isolation scorers and putting them in situations where they ran a lot of pick and roll to get into the three levels of the floor, right? Which was top of the key, kind of wing, mid-range, and layups, right? Tatum and Brown, very good at all three levels, so he took advantage of that and put them in situations out of pick and roll with a bigger lineup. We'll get to that point later. To kind of get going. I think KPJ is best out of pick and roll, and when he gets an initial screen and is able to do his thing, that's why he was one of the best Rockets in terms of creating his own shot. Not necessarily a good thing when you have lack of spacing and he's the only guy doing it, but I think that's something to consider. And lastly, just the ability to pass the ball, and I think that's one thing with Marcus Smart. I'm not comparing Marcus Smart and Kevin Porter Jr., but I think just how he was able to help Marcus Smart transition and play to his strengths. I think with the pick and roll and with the catch and shoot three-point shooting, that's something we can expect to see a lot more with Kevin Porter Jr. But most importantly, it's going to come out of defense. And if we're mentioning Kevin Porter Jr., we're mentioning a guy who I've been very vocal about this on LOR, and I've been very vocal about this previously on Twitter too. He is the one player who gets lost in transition all the time. He will shoot a shot or he'll do something, and he's, as a point guard, you should be one of the first few guys or the first guy back in transition. It's floor balance. It's just transition floor balance. It's just basic stuff. But sometimes he was late getting back. And Udoka's a guy who will play clips over and over and over again of you messing up to prove a point that you got to play better. That you got to put a lot more effort. And I think that's the sort of confrontation and push that KPJ needs to play a lot more consistent. When he knows, hey, it's times where I'm going to put my hand over your shoulder and give you a side hug and kind of help you through it. But there's times where I got to push you, man. And you have to be able to hear a different voice than John Lucas, hear a different voice than Steven Silas. You have to hear a different voice in the front office who's been helping him. You're on a contract now, buddy. A bigger contract. You have a chance to prove yourself to be that guard if you want to be, which he so desperately has talked about wanting to be that point guard. And a guy like Udoka can really push him. And just based off what happened with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who says that he can't be successful? It's still, based on what we've seen, it's a tall task, but he can do it. He has all the talent to be able to do it. And maybe a guy like Udoka is somebody he needs to be able to listen to and move forward.
What happens the first time that KPJ walks into the locker room and Ime Udoka hears,
I'm the head honcho?
Oh, man. That deserves an.
Oh, my.
On that note, I mentioned this in Rockets Watch, I believe Tuesday afternoon, that I felt it a bit disingenuous to say that the Celtics didn't have like a point guard on that roster under Ime Udoka, because Marcus Smart absolutely is a point guard. Maybe you don't look at him in the straight traditional like floor general point guard role, but he is
passer, man.
Yeah, he's a good passer. He's a ball handler. He takes good care of the basketball. It just so happened that Ime and that Celtics team prided themselves on kind of playmaking by committee, and everybody was required to, facilitate and create for one another. And they took a significant leap as far as secondary passes made, right? Passing up good shots for great shots. Again, kind of getting back to some of that unselfish play that Ime kind of prides himself on as a coach, that philosophy.
Screen and roll, hit the paint, pass. Screen and roll, hit the paint, pass, repeat. That was the offense. You get your two of your best 3-level scorers, Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, in actions with your two bigs, and let them get going. Not that much dribble handoff, which I think will become a lot more of a staple in his offense here, but just getting your players who are good at getting to the paint or that mid-range area, drawing in the defense and allowing them to make the pass. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown can make a cross-court pass or a pass to the opposite corner. And I have no idea if Jalen Green or Kevin Porter Jr. will be ready for that next season.
Are you going to cry tears of happiness the first time you see Jalen and or KPJ make a cross-court pass?
There's a few things when I've been covering the Rockets that I feel like I repeat every single time I talk about them. It used to be 21 series with D'Antoni. I feel like now it's just Jalen Green hitting a cross-court pass. So and once I see it happen, oh my God, I will be the first person to shout out like happiness because he's so good. If he can just learn how to pass, man, it opens up so much more for Jalen. But sorry,
Alykhan's going to scream it out. He's going to be like,
"That was sweet to see."
He's going to be in the stands at Toyota Center.
Nice. Makes me happy. Makes me smile. Nice.
Oh, there we go. Hang on. Where is it?
Hey, Houston fans. I am so happy.
One of those in there for good measure. That's the other guy, too. I mean, we might as well stick with the guard play here for a moment. When it comes to what Udoka is going to do for Jalen Green, right? Jalen has constantly talked about wanting to be a two-way force one day in the NBA and having a coach that is going to help encourage and cultivate and grow what he can do defensively. We know what he's capable of offensively, and he still hasn't hit his ceiling there, right? There's still so much more to unlock with his offensive game, and that was one of the areas that Udoka was actually really successful with as far as continuing the development and the growth of a Jayson Tatum, right? Tasking him with being more of an impact player as far as creating for his teammates. And that's what really elevated Tatum from being just, okay, he's a really, really good player. He's a bona fide scorer into, oh, this guy is an MVP candidate, right? Because not only is he himself elite, but he is also elevating the play of his teammates because he's making them better on the floor. The everydayers who listen to the show every single day will note those points from our conversation with John Corrales from Locked On Celtics, talking about the leap that Jayson Tatum took under Ime Udoka because of the responsibilities that Udoka gave him within the offensive system that the Celtics were running that season. So I'm excited about the leap that we could potentially see Jalen take. And we do know, based on some of the reporting that was out there, there were some concerns, right, from Jalen's camp about the lack of structure, the lack of identity, the lack of a true hierarchy with this Rockets team after Jalen's rookie year. And it's not like those things got fixed in his sophomore year, unfortunately. So now you're bringing in a guy who is the de facto leader of this team, the leader of the locker room, who's going to instill some stability, a hierarchy, and have some accountability across the board for all the guys on this roster.
The good questions that I hope, Jackson, when you attend the press conference, that you could potentially ask. What is his vision for the offensive hierarchy of his team? Who does he envision handling the ball the most or touching the basketball the most? He's probably going to say, oh, it's going to be like committee, which is right.
He's going to say Dacian Knicks and Rockets fans are going to lose their minds.
No, but in all seriousness, though, he's going to say this team was very much ISO focused. We're going to shift that to more of a together brand of basketball, which we're connected. He's probably going to say that as the answer. But I'm curious to see, and as we go into summer league offseason, what is the hierarchy under Ime Udoka? He's been involved in his last few teams. If you look at it from a perspective of the stars he's coached, right? We're not saying Jalen and KPJ are stars just yet, or Jabari and Sengun. But just think about it. With Brooklyn, who do you have? You had Kevin Durant, Kyrie, and you also coached James. In Philly, he coached Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons when he was an assistant there. Then you go to Boston, and he was a head coach, an assistant and head coach. He had when he was head coach, he had Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So there has
and you can even go back to the San Antonio days, the Big Three and Kawhi Leonard. There you go.
But under circumstances, they had players who you viewed and you knew, hey, you know what? This guy is a guy. I don't think the Rockets right now, at least in my opinion, have an idea who that hierarchy is. So with a young team, I'm curious to see, because his offense has been predicated on getting his best 3-level scorers or best players who can play make, having the basketball running pick and roll. I wonder how he envisions that with KPJ, Jalen, Jabari, and Alperen Sengun, or maybe a number 1 or number 2 or whatever overall pick that the Rockets will have? That is one question I'm eager to hear his response.
Coming up, we're going to get into some more of the defensive side of the basketball. We'll talk a little Alperen Sengun. What might we see Ime Udoka try with Sengun defensively that is different than how Steven Silas approached that side of the basketball with the Turkish big man? We'll get there in just one moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. When it comes to purchasing tickets, it shouldn't be a stressful experience, right? Whether you're trying to go out to a concert or maybe a play, or you're trying to catch, last-minute tickets to the game, you shouldn't be stressed out about trying to get your tickets. Game Time can help you with that. They have flash deals on last-minute tickets. It's easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. Images of seat views so you know exactly the type of bang you're getting for your buck. It's the fastest-growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're all set. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your very first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today's episode is also brought to you by Nissan, Nissan's most electric player of the week, which is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. And this week's most electric player has to go to none other than potential Houston Rockets Scoot Henderson. Because look, while Wembanyama is very clearly the crown jewel of this year's NBA draft, Scoot Henderson is one heck of a consolation prize if the Rockets land at number 2 overall in this year's NBA draft. He is such an electric, dynamic player, has a brilliant feel for the game, attacks in transition and finishes with this fierce ability in and around the basket. Scoot is going to be a bona fide star player at the NBA level, and the Rockets would be lucky to get their hands on him. Now, if you want to get your hands on a bit more electricity in your life, you can check out the 2023 Nissan Ariya, which packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one electric vehicle. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, Alykhan, let's talk a little about, and we're gonna do a whole show further down the line, really exploring some of the defensive possibilities with this Rockets team. How could we not, right? With the excitement about what Ime Udoka may be able to accomplish with a Jabari Smith Jr., a Tari Eason, those forwards who clearly have a proclivity for defense and a good understanding of that side of the ball already, and project to be plus level defenders. It's going to be really exciting to see what he accomplishes with them. But I think one of the biggest questions kind of burning at the forefront of Rockets fans' minds is what happens with Sengun. And in fact, there's been a bit of this like weird narrative, right? Of like, oh, well, Ime Udoka is a defensive coach and he's going to immediately get Sengun out of here because he, struggles on the defensive side. And that was not my takeaway.
He's gone. Breaking news. No, I'm kidding.
per sources, trust me, bro. Like that's where Alykhan's coming from right now. No, it was actually, so reportedly the Celtics actually wanted Alperen Sengun back in the 2021 draft. So this was actually a thing. And so I want to highlight this. The Celtics did not have a first-round pick to work with in that draft after trading it as part of the trade that sent veteran point guard Kemba Walker to the OKC Thunder for old friend Al Horford and Moses Brown to kick off the 2021 NBA offseason. Before that trade, Boston evidently had eyes for the Rockets' big man as a draft prospect. This was during the process in which Ime Udoka was going through the process, becoming the head coach of the Celtics, right? This was easily something like the Celtics had to have had a vision for how they wanted to deploy Alperen Sengun, possibly putting him basically in an identical role to what Al Horford is doing for the Celtics right now, playing alongside Rob Williams in that front court. So, Alykhan, when you think about what Udoka might be able to do with Sengun, to me, the biggest excitement is just possibility, right? And I think that was where we've highlighted this throughout the season, some of the frustrations in how Steven Silas was kind of just resigned to the idea of only playing Sengun in drop. And I know one of the areas that you suggested earlier in the season was the idea of playing Sengun in an off-ball role so that he was involved in less of those pick and roll actions and kind of utilizing him as a bit of like a roaming presence, something similar to what Udoka actually did a little bit of with Rob Williams in Boston.
Do you have Alp saying, give me that?
Yes. Where is it?
Give me that shit.
There it is.
Weak side shot blocker, Alperen Sengun. Interesting. Look, I need to see more of it, and I have to go back and look at my notes and watch the game tape again because it's been a few weeks since the season ended. I like the idea of Jabari playing drop or Jabari in that initial switch of a pick and roll action and an LP on the weak side corner. Let me tell you how NBA offenses work early in the shot clock. Usually the weakest shooter goes deep into the corner to draw the defender as close to him as possible. In this case, the Rockets towards the second half of the season were putting LP masking, but you can just say basically hiding him on the corner shooter to kind of take him away from being involved in a play, especially against teams that run a lot more spread pick and roll. Spread pick and roll usually occurring at the top of the key, so it's unlikely a wing player who even as a poor three-point shooter is going to leave the wing to set a screen. He will likely stay there to kind of, just provide some sort of optimal spacing, even though it's not really optimal. Now, what happens is that LP is then tasked with the responsibility of figuring out should he cheat off and when. If he cheats off too early, then the guy can just cut baseline right behind him. Or if he cheats off too early, he can the corner shooter or corner player can just kind of lift up towards the top of the circle and get involved that way. So you have to be very careful how you're making the reads, right? But also, if you do make the right read and the team rotates properly, get Alp coming over weak side 6'9", 6'10", being able to block shots. Now, I don't personally like the Al Horford comparisons, and I'll tell you why. Al Horford is much better with his feet defensively than Alperen Sengun is. And I'm not saying he won't get there or it's not a possibility, but let's just realistically right now, Al Horford and Alperen Sengun are very different players defensively. Number one, Al Horford's also 7 feet, or he's closer to 7 feet than Alperen Sengun is, right? So I'm just looking at it from that perspective. Now, from a role perspective, yeah, Al Horford used to run a lot more dribble handoffs. He actually did a lot more of pick and roll in Ime Udoka's time there. And it was a lot more pick and roll where he was popping out to the three-point line, or he was going to the middle of the floor and being able to make a pass. So that's going to come with, which we've talked about towards the end of the season, Alp needing to add a three-point shot, shooting at 35, 36%. Even something relatively simple like that would just help the Rockets offense so much, because then it would allow Jalen and KPJ, who I figure to have the ball a lot more, to be able to kind of get to their spots and get going. So from that perspective, I think that helps. Now, if we're looking at defensively, this concept of like roaming is something that Robert Williams did, right? He would basically roam and be able to kind of do things. Going back to that with the LP example, LP, if he's able to roam, it's going to be about his decision-making. And that's an area he has to improve, even though I said, it's about making the reads. It's as if you're also making a read and drop coverage. You have to be able to be in the right position. If you step up too far, or if you step back too much, or you just don't move your hips or your feet that well, that's going to allow the offensive player or the big to be able to get by you. And that was a problem with LP. It wasn't necessarily that he wasn't thinking the right things, but he was a little too late in terms of his movements, or just physically unable to kind of be in that position to do it. So I'm eager to see kind of how that works. I do want to pivot, Jackson. You made up the roaming example. I like to also see Jabari in that roaming. And I do think that if you put Jabari
is it weird? You said Jabari. Is it weird that my mind was actually floating more towards Tari, because we've talked before about how effective Tari is when he's off the ball, like shooting gaps and using his length. And
he's not a good perimeter player right now. And nothing against Tari. He's just much better at reading and stealing the basketball than he is setting in front. So that's a really good example. But I just don't necessarily see that just yet, because you want Tari involved initially because of his physicality, right? The thing about Tari is he's so physical at the level of the screen. So when you're defending a point, if you're a point of attack defender and you're defending at the level of the screen, you want somebody who's going to disrupt that. right? You want somebody who's going to be able to force the ball handler or force the big rolling to go into a different angle. Now, if Tari's off the ball, he's roaming, he can play the passing lanes and do things which he's really good at. I personally want Tari closer to the perimeter than the corner, because then he can also be disruptive, as he can dig from the nail and kind of steal the ball away. Or he can just be involved on the switch and do different things and kind of funnel towards a big who's rotating over. So I like Tari there. Jabari, I like as a weak side roamer, because I feel like Jabari naturally likes to help a lot. I learned a lot about him last season. I used to watch him when he was in the corner defensively. He loves to help. He's super aggressive. He overhelps at times. I think Ime will try to fix that for him technique-wise. But if that's, you just learn certain qualities of players. If that's what Jabari likes to do, put him in situations where he's having to make those reads and using his length to his advantage, right? So I also think that there's a possibility we could see Jabari in that roamer role to be able to do it. And I don't discount the Rockets going out and getting a proper defensive big or a center for agency. Brook Lopez is somebody I'd like to get on this team, not just for the defensive purposes, offensive purposes, but I feel like Brook Lopez would do a lot of really good things under Ime Udoka.
It'll be really interesting to see what direction the Rockets actually decide to go with free agency and how much impact Ime Udoka will have on the types of players they bring in, right? Because I'd love Brook Lopez on this roster, and it would make sense for them to have kind of a defensive alternate big to go to either off the bench or possibly in place of Sengun situationally in that starting lineup. It would fit Ime Udoka's motif quite well. Now, with that, Alykhan, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
Follow me on Rockets_insider. Make sure you follow me on TikTok at Rockets Insider. I will tell you that I will now be looking into Boston Celtics film from his time there, but looking into defensively what Brooklyn ran when he was there. Just kind of looking at his different coaching stops and picking up some schematic things we can expect to see here. I do think we're going to see a lot of 21 series that we see with the Sacramento Kings. So the Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk action that I've referenced, 3-man action, and something that Mike D'Antoni used to run. I think with Sengun, KPJ, and Jalen, granted, if that's the rock, I think we're going to see a lot of 21 series going into it, because it has a lot of components of just full pick and roll. So stay tuned, but I think there's some things to look at in terms from a Boston basketball perspective, kind of coming over, and also from his time in Brooklyn.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked on Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if you could ask Ime Udoka one question at the introductory press conference. What would you want to ask him? Put it in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.